So because news has been flying so fast, you may have missed an event in November that in retrospect may turn out to be of truly historic importance. A presidential election was held in a European Union country. The two establishment parties lost to two outsider parties, and the Supreme Court simply annulled the election. And there was no allegation that there were any problems with the voting or the vote counting. So we have a news story up at Dropsite by Alexander Zajac that takes a deep dive into what happened. It's a wild story and worth a full read. But the short version is that on November 24th, Romanian voters delivered an unexpected victory to a right-wing populist named Călin Gorgescu, and in the opening round of the country's presidential election. So always considered a long shot, Gorgescu had been polling in the single digits just weeks before surging to claim first place with 23% of the vote moving on to the runoff. The result shocked Romania's two dominant parties, who found themselves on the sidelines as Gorgescu campaigned for the runoff against another anti-establishment candidate who came in second place, Elena Lasconi of the reformist Save Romania party. Now, 5 days later, a news outlet called Context elevated claims that the election had been swung by the Kremlin through a social media campaign. On November 29th, the outlet published a report that included a summary of an analysis it conducted using software from a Ukrainian firm that for the last several years had NATO and EU and others as clients. So Context's executive director spent 20 years working in the press office of the U.S. Embassy in Bucharest. Now, on December 4th, 4 days before the deciding round was supposed to take place, Romania's Supreme Defense Council released a small batch of heavily redacted documents from the country's foreign intelligence service. The documents outlined allegations of a Kremlin-backed social media campaign that supported Gorgescu in violation of national election laws. Quote, data were obtained, the accompanying government statement read, quote, revealing an aggressive promotion campaign that exploited the algorithms of some social media platforms to increase the popularity of Călin Gorgescu at an accelerated pace, unquote. Within hours, the U.S. State Department expressed its, quote, concern over the allegations. 2 days later, on December 6th, Romania's Constitutional Court unanimously ruled the November 24th vote was invalid. Quote, the entire electoral process for electing the president of Romania is annulled, the court announced, citing government claims of irregularities on social media. Now, a week and a half ago, the court finally announced a new date of May 4th for a new election. Radio Free Europe and Radio Free Europe/Radio Liberty, which is funded by the U.S., reported Romania had become the latest victim of a, quote, aggressive hybrid war waged by the Kremlin. 4 U.S. senators issued a statement condemning, quote, Vladimir Putin's manipulation of Chinese Communist Party-controlled TikTok to undermine Romania's democratic process. So it wasn't just Russia, now it's Russia and China. The State Department, though, seemed fine with the election cancellation, saying in a statement, quote, we note the Romanian Constitutional Court's decision today, unquote, and expressed, quote, confidence in Romania's democratic institutions and processes, including investigations into foreign malign influence. Okay, so that's the case they laid out. The whodunit is so fun, and I don't even want to spoil it for readers, but I'm going to because this is a newscast. I'm going to tell you how this ended. It was not the Kremlin. It was not Chairman Xi. What happened was the PNL, which is one of the establishment parties, did that thing where you go and support a fringe candidate to try to draw votes away from your opponent. Both major parties in the U.S. do this. The Democrats love to boost libertarians.
Little Reid Hoffman
in
action.
Senate seats. Reid Hoffman likes to do it. And Republicans are the most aggressive advocates for Green Party ballot access all the time. So what happened here, imagine the scenario, is that basically both the Democrats and the Republicans lost, and the Greens and the Libertarians went to the second round, accidentally boosted by these moronic establishment parties. So that's what happened. So the funding for this TikTok campaign came from one of the major establishment parties. And what's wild, and Alex goes into this in the article, is that when they originally put out that batch of documents showing that this whole thing happened, the name of the consulting firm that had run this entire operation was redacted. So in other words, Romania knew the name. And not only did Romania know it, the US knew it. The name of the consulting firm that ran it was redacted. We now know the identity of that consulting firm, and it is a consulting firm that works almost only with this one establishment Romanian party. Like that, it's like that. We have the same thing here in the United States. You got firms that work with Republicans, firms that work with Democrats.
Yeah.
So once they identified, oh, this social media campaign is being run by this consulting firm, they immediately knew that it was one of these parties, that it was this particular party that had funded this operation. Yet instead they redacted it and claimed that it was Russia, knowing full well that it was not. This was not a mistake where they're like, oh, they knew with certainty, for a fact, who ran this thing, and the State Department publicly supported the annulment of this election. Anyway, the key point here, why they care so much about Romania, you used to think that Germany had the most important European American military base. Not anymore. Romania now is host to the most important American military base in Europe. And a right-wing populist who has said that the war between Ukraine and Russia ought to end is a direct threat to American military interests vis-a-vis that base. And so here we are.
The other part of the story, first, as I was reading this reporting, I was like, it needs like a flow chart, because the other one is relying on the assessment that it was Russia from a firm that does most of its work with NATO, right?
Right.
Like
They use this Ukrainian AI software company. They claim that, and this is the U.S.-funded news outlet, relying on a Ukrainian NATO-funded.
Insane.
The U.S. and the Romanian establishment parties are accusing Russia of interfering in Romanian politics. Who is leading the charge in making that accusation? A U.S.-funded news outlet relying on a NATO-funded Ukrainian software company, claiming that there is foreign interference.
Yeah.
It's like, guys,
blaming Russia.
That's kind of foreign interference. Like,
it's foreign interference.
Like, you're actually doing the thing that you're accusing Russia of doing.
Yes. And it's getting like no coverage in American media because it's like, oh, Romania, whatever.
And I think it should, because it's the cancellation of an election.
A NATO country.
When you don't have any evidence of voter fraud or anything, like no allegations that the vote was tainted. Like the people went out and voted for these two characters. There's
zero evidence that votes were tampered with.
And it doesn't mean I like this Gorgesco guy. He's like a right-wing creep. But come on, like the guy won.
If votes are not tampered with, like if you cannot prove that votes are tampered with, and you're just mad that someone came in and put up a bunch of, let's just say, billboards, whether they're digital billboards, physical billboards, digital flyers, or literal flyers, and you say that it was foreign interference.
But it was actually Romanians.